The observation deck of the Galactic Youth Academy station hummed with the excited chatter of a dozen species. Anna Martinez stood near the reinforced viewport, her tablet displaying the day's curriculum, while Jackson Chen checked the atmospheric controls one final time. They were the only humans aboard the station, tasked with overseeing the education of the galaxy's most dangerous young predators. 5 minutes until the stellar flare viewing, Anna announced, her voice cutting through the cacophony of growls, clicks, and subsonic rumbles that passed for conversation among their students. The Vrakoth cubs were the first to react. All 7 of them surged toward the observation deck's entrance, their obsidian scales gleaming under the artificial lights. Each stood nearly 2 meters tall despite their youth, with rows of serrated teeth and claws that could punch through starship hulls. They'd been bred for war by a species that had conquered 43 systems before the Galactic Coalition had convinced them that education might serve their offspring better than endless conflict. Behind the Vrakoth came the Keswick twins, feline predators whose ancestors had hunted in packs across the methane swamps of Kes Prime. Their 6 eyes tracked every movement, calculating attack vectors even in casual social situations. The throne delegation followed, their crystalline exoskeletons clicking against the deck plating, mandibles twitching with barely contained predatory instinct. They all converged on the doorway at once, a mass of teeth, claws, and evolutionary advantages that had placed each of their species at the apex of their respective food chains. The entrance became a bottleneck of snarling competition, each young predator determined to claim the best viewing position through sheer dominance. Anna glanced at Jackson, who merely raised an eyebrow and gestured toward the chaos. She nodded and stepped forward, her soft-soled shoes making barely a whisper against the deck. "Ladies first," she said simply, her tone carrying none of the aggression that typically preceded dominance displays in the station. The effect was immediate and profound. The mass of predatory youth froze as if caught in a stasis field. Scales, fur, and exoskeletons rippled with uncertainty. The Vrakoth cubs, who had been shoulder-checking each other for position, slowly disentangled themselves. The Keswick twins' ears flattened in what their instructors had learned to recognize as confusion. Even the throne, whose species had no concept of gender-based social hierarchy, paused their advance. Then, remarkably, they stepped back. The female students moved first, uncertainty in their movements but responding to something in the humans' simple statement that bypassed their predatory instincts entirely. A young Vrakoth named Shikara was the first through the door, her black scales seeming to darken with what might have been embarrassment. The Keswick female, Vara, followed with her tail held low. One by one, the female students filed through in an orderly fashion, their movements cautious, almost experimental. The males remained pressed against the walls of the corridor, watching with expressions that ranged from bewilderment to something approaching awe. Tikren, the largest of the Vrakoth cubs and the undisputed dominant of his clutch, stood utterly still, his predatory yellow eyes fixed on Anna as she waited patiently by the door. Jackson stepped up beside her, arms crossed, and nodded toward the remaining students. "Gentlemen," the word was as foreign to them as the gesture that preceded it, but they moved. They filed through the doorway with none of their earlier aggression, their movements almost careful, as if navigating completely unfamiliar social territory. When the last student had entered, Anna and Jackson exchanged a brief smile before following them inside. The observation deck had transformed from a potential battlefield into an organized classroom. Students had segregated themselves not by species or dominance hierarchy, but by an entirely new social structure they were only beginning to comprehend. "Instructor Martinez," Tikren's voice rumbled from the front row, his translator rendering his clicks and growls into galactic common. "What is—" "Ladies first?" Anna moved to the front of the room, her small frame dwarfed by even the youngest of her students. She was unarmed, unarmored, and by any objective measure the most vulnerable creature on the station. Yet every predatory eye tracked her with something that transcended their hunting instincts. "It's a custom from Earth," she began, pulling up a holographic display. One of many, actually. "It's about respect. About recognizing that strength isn't just about who can fight the hardest or push the hardest. It's about choosing to step back, to defer, to acknowledge others." "But you are prey," Shikara hissed, the statement carrying no malice, only confusion. "Your species has no natural weapons. No venom, no claws, no armored hide. We learned this in comparative biology. How can prey establish dominance through politeness? Jackson laughed, the sound startling several students. Who said anything about dominance? That's the point you're all missing. Humans didn't become the most successful species on Earth through individual strength. We did it through cooperation, through social bonds, through the radical idea that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is choose not to use your strength. The stellar flare bloomed beyond the viewport, bathing the observation deck in amber and gold light. But none of the students were watching the astronomical phenomenon they'd come to see. They were watching Anna and Jackson, these peculiar prey species that somehow walked among apex predators as equals. Your species conquered your worlds alone, Anna continued, her voice soft but carrying clearly through the silent room. Each of you individually superior. Humanity conquered Earth in groups. We survived not because we were the strongest, but because we learned to make the strong protect the weak, to make the swift wait for the slow, to make those who could take everything choose to share instead. To Kren's massive head tilted, a gesture of contemplation. This is why the coalition chose humans as instructors? Not despite your weakness, but because of how you overcame it? We prefer to think of it as adaptation rather than weakness, Jackson replied. But yes, the galaxy doesn't need more perfect predators. It needs species that can live together, work together, respect each other. Vira's tail twitched. And this lady's first custom. It teaches this? It's one small example, Anna said. There are thousands of others. Holding doors, saying please and thank you, queuing in lines, apologizing when you're wrong. They seem simple, even silly, but they're the building blocks of civilization that works not through fear, but through mutual respect. The observation deck fell silent except for the hum of life support and the distant pulse of the station's fusion core. Outside, the stellar flare continued its cosmic dance, but inside, something more significant was happening. Seeds were being planted in young minds bred for dominance but capable of so much more. When the viewing ended and it came time to leave, the students didn't rush the door. They waited. They organized themselves, and when the first female student moved to exit, the males stepped back without being told, understanding finally beginning to dawn in their predatory eyes. Anna and Jackson remained behind, watching their students file out in orderly fashion. Think it'll stick? Jackson asked quietly. Anna smiled. We're teaching predators to be people. It'll take time. But yes, I think eventually it'll stick. After all, that's what humans do best. We take impossible odds and turn them into inevitabilities. Outside the observation deck, in the corridors of the station, the predator cubs walked with new awareness, carrying with them a lesson more valuable than any combat technique or hunting strategy. They carried the understanding that true strength sometimes means choosing gentleness, and that the most advanced civilizations aren't built on who can dominate the fastest, but on who can cooperate the longest. And somewhere in the vast complexity of human culture they'd been taught to respect, they were beginning to understand why a species with no claws had inherited the stars.